All right. So that's fun. Well, it's just now exactly 10 o'clock. So we're going to go ahead and get started. If you have other ideas about things you might do in a self-driving car, if you had free time, go ahead and say hi in the chat and go ahead and enter your answers there. And let's dive in. So today we're talking about taking charge of your AI strategy. And with me today, we have Helen and Dave Edwards. They're the founders of Sonder Scheme. I'm Elise Keith, the founder of Lucid Meetings. And who are you? So we asked during the sign up a little bit about what brought you to this webinar, your interest in this topic, and here's what you said. So first of all, when it comes to AI, one of the questions was, how might your organization work with AI? And for this one, the answers are all over the board. For the most part, a lot of people thought they might use AI to look at data and help make decisions. You might use it to support customers and build it in your work and your products. And several people weren't entirely sure about how they would use it at all. My alarm that I sent for 55 minutes turned out to be a 55-second alarm. So let's move on. So the next question we asked was, how important do you believe AI will be to your organization's future? And this one surprised me. It didn't surprise me that most people said they thought it would be important but not central. I'm guessing that's pretty common with folks who are not deep into AI already. And I'm sure our presenters will explain that. But what surprised me was that everybody agreed that no, not important isn't a correct option. You know, this is going to matter to everyone. No one said that it wasn't important. And we had a lot of questions. So when we asked you what your specific questions were, several people said things along the lines of just like, what is this? How do I get my head around it? How do we get started? Others wanted to know, well, they understood AI maybe a bit, but is AI capable of answering or handling the kinds of questions and getting the answers that they actually need? Or is it going to be too simple for that still? We wanted to know how AI is used in all kinds of very specific settings. So I saw healthcare, I saw manufacturing, I saw education, so many different sort of industry-specific uses for AI, including, how you use AI internally to support your teams, but also externally, both with customers and in a sales setting. More importantly, from my perspective, when you're using AI, how do you, even if you know what it's about, make sure that your team understands what they're doing and build trust into the process of working with these really advanced tools? And finally, how do we use AI in industries and introduce these kinds of things when we know that our colleagues and our whole sector is really resistant to this kind of new technology and change? Now, one thing you may notice when you look at all of these questions is that these are questions primarily about artificial intelligence itself. There aren't a lot of questions here about meetings. One of the questions I got several times from people who saw the email and registered was, hey, this looks like a fascinating topic, but why is Lucid Meetings putting on this webinar and introducing this topic? We know what you guys are about. You guys are about the meeting. And if you've seen me present or been in any of my workshops, you know that you may have seen this graphic. We focus a lot on how to run an effective meeting by making sure you've got clear purpose, structure, time, results. This is what our software supports. But I think if you've seen me talk recently, you also know that it's not just about these functional areas in the meeting. We talk a lot about how that meeting is impacting people, how what you're doing in the meeting is impacting their relationships, your business culture, and making a stronger workplace. So those are two important focus areas, and we spent a lot of time over the last couple of years really diving into both the people and the functions of meetings themselves. Today, we're going to start branching into the content. So when you look at what's going on in an effective meeting, you're dealing with the basics of the meeting process itself, making sure that works for the people, but it also has to be appropriate for the kind of content that you're working with. And today, what we're looking at is a meeting designed, a workshop specifically, if you know the 16 types, a meeting designed specifically for dealing with the content matter of AI, which is an incredibly complex topic. So I'm thrilled to introduce our presenters in just a second, but let me let you know what to expect. So there will be a presentation. They're going to share with us about AI and answer some of those questions, and also about their workshop. While they're presenting, the chat's open, chat with me, chat with each other, go for it. And if you have questions, I'd ask you to add them to the Q&A box. That makes it way easier for us to see them at the end, because we will stop and do Q&A after their presentation. And then, of course, yes, the recording will be shared after. So with that, let me turn it over to Helen and Dave Edwards. They are the founders of Sonder Scheme, and I will let them introduce themselves in more detail.
Excellent, thank you. I will take over and share our screen. There we go. Okay, all working? Excellent. Thanks for being here, and we're very happy to have all of you here. Looking forward to getting a bunch of questions later. We are the founders of Sonder Scheme, which is a company that we formed this year. It's our second turn at building a research and services business in the AI space. As you saw quickly in the bio, our first one, Intelligentsia, we sold to Atlantic Media a few years ago, and we're back in the business now doing this, which is fantastic, and we're excited to be part of the Lucid Meetings platform. What we do is strategy and leadership work. We provide strategic services to companies, large and small. We provide training for people to understand AI and how to work with AI. That's where this product comes out of. And we provide executive coaching for leaders who want a more in-depth and more hands-on relationship with AI experts. With a variety of the services that we provide, we also create a digital product out of it. And what you're going to hear about today is that effort for helping people figure out how to kickstart a strategy process to understand AI with a really fun and engaging workshop. But let me start with the question of what is artificial intelligence, also known as AI. You'll see some examples on the screen. Top left is the thing you use every day, probably, and is the biggest AI in the world, the most important, the Google search engine. And I'll talk a little bit about that later. Below that is a neuro self-driving vehicle. There's no person in it. There's either driving it or being driven in it. It's a device that's designed to deliver things like groceries to you. You then see in the middle image recognition systems that can pick out people or things and identify them. That one in particular is really fun if you're interested. It's a really cool thing that you can use yourself on the web. Below that in the middle is an example of using AI. It was a collaboration between Autodesk and Airbus to design new airline components in ways that humans couldn't understand and see. And so using the AI to find patterns, and we've seen this being used to mimic biological systems that we don't understand, but an AI can understand. The top right is an example of Microsoft HoloLens being used in the medical field. And the bottom right video that's looping around, that's a fascinating avatar that is both understanding the person and understanding that person's emotion, but also expressing emotion back. So these are sort of the full range of experiences. All of these are real and work and give you sort of an understanding of the breadth of what's possible. So I'm going to walk through a couple of different sections real quickly to give you a sense of why are we here? What are we doing? Why would you want to actually take on an AI strategy workshop? So the first is that we view AI as the next major trend in digital integration. You think about it, the first one was the PC era, where humans started to put all of their information, digitize it, and make it accessible through a computer on our desktop. Right? This is the IBM Microsoft world, where you could calculate and write and do all kinds of things, but you're organizing information on a machine that was in front of you on the desktop. The next was the internet phase, and this is when all those devices started to get connected, and you could communicate and find information across the internet, and starting now to be in all kinds of IoT devices, the little things, everything from a Nest thermostat to a security camera has information on it now. What happens in this next phase of AI is that all of those devices are able to learn. They're able to understand the world. They're able to have agency. And that ability to learn is the core part of artificial intelligence for us. It's the ability for a machine to either learn by being taught by a human, or learning from the data itself, or learning from the experience, like a self-driving car. If you tell it to drive down the road and it stays on the road, it's learned how to stay on the road. If it goes off the road, it's learned that it's not on the road anymore. That sort of cycle of learning is the core component of artificial intelligence. And that's what's so exciting, is all of these connected devices are now able to learn and make decisions on their own. This change is affecting us on an individual basis. The amount of time that we spend with media has been relatively constant over the last few years, as you'll see on the left. What we look at, though, is the amount of time we spend with smart media. So this is internet devices, whether there are phones or internet-connected devices. They're smart devices that are increasingly and almost consistently powered by artificial intelligence. The big change is that over the last few years, we've increased the amount of time we spend with smart media by an hour per day. That means another hour a day that we're all spending with AI. And as we learn about that experience of working with these smart machines, it has a huge impact for every one of us. I've talked about the learning cycle. For us, this is the core component of AI to understand it, that as we think about jobs in your business, we traditionally think about it as jobs to be done that are singular things that happen in a sequence. But now, working with machines, there is a cycle that happens that it's not just about the job to be done, but you have to pull that apart and understand, what do we learn from the action that was taken? What's the data that is taken out of that action? Who learns from it? Is it human or is it a machine? What knowledge is gained from that learning, and who owns that knowledge? Is that the human or the machine? And then who decides how to apply that knowledge in context next? And you can see how that unbundling of the jobs is what becomes a very fascinating thing to think about, what's possible when you combine machine intelligence with human intelligence. Now, we're here today talking about AI strategy and a strategy workshop. So a quick walkthrough of 5 things of where we see why AI is dramatically changing strategy, and why when you're thinking about setting strategy for a company, you have to think about that strategic process in a different way. The first is competition has fundamentally changed. These are the 5 big internet platforms, tech companies, however you want to describe them, the 5 biggest companies in the world. They each have a phenomenal amount of artificial intelligence development. They're the companies that are gobbling up all of the PhDs, paying them extraordinary amounts of money, and they're focused on using that AI to advance their business, and they're doing it in a remarkably effective way. Beyond that, though, these companies have all moved into pretty much any industry they feel like moving into, and AI is the core way that they're actually invading those industries. This means that the traditional strategic definition of understanding what your competition is, who your industry is, how you define the boundaries has fundamentally changed, because AI allows everything to bleed across all of those different industry boundaries. Second is resources are changing. We've always thought about our resources as capital assets and human resources, but now we have capital assets, human resources, and machine resources, or we call them machine employees. And you have to think about these resources as having the advantages, but also the challenges, as you do with human employees, sorry. The machines learn and make decisions and have agency to act, and you have to think about both the opportunity for that, but also the challenge that it brings. And you also have to obviously think about how your competition is using these. That strings together into the question of value. You think about strategic decision-making of what is the value that our company brings to versus competition. The new value is really this combined layer of the human and the machine, where that interaction point is between the human and machine, and how you build a human-machine operating system. That ability and the ability to really push that through in your industry is now the new value to consider in a strategic process. And risk, as we talked about the learning cycle, you see we've added a few words to this slide, which is that you have to think about the learning cycle as not just an opportunity to use machines, but also the risk that the machines bring into the process. Machines and AI will learn from data that exists in the world. That data is fundamentally biased because we as humans are fundamentally biased. We think about the world just from a human perspective. We think about it differently than our dog does. So our view of the world is biased by our own experience, and the internet is a reflection of human history. So as an AI uses that data, how do you actually think about using that data without perpetuating the biases that you don't want it to? When it looks to apply that and take action, how do you do that without compromising ethics that you either have been regulated not to cross over, or you just don't want to from a corporate standpoint? And how do you learn from people and their experiences without compromising their privacy? All of these things become a massive new challenge for strategic people in this world of AI governance, and it's a core part of what we do. Finally, a big change in strategy is that the world of knowledge has changed. Google has made a mission to organize the world's information. They do a fantastic job of it, and we all benefit from it. But their organization comes from using an algorithm. So all of the information in the world is being designed to be found by an algorithm. That algorithm is then deciding how to present it to the rest of us. And so we have to look at the world, whether it's thinking about how a company describes itself through to how a news organization talks about what happened in the day, to realize that all of that is being designed to be filtered through a machine. And so as we think about a strategic analysis of the world, we have to consider that as a major opportunity to access information, but also a major challenge to understand that it's all coming through a machine. So what do we do with all of this? There are 3 key components for us. The first is learning, and this came up in a bunch of the questions. So we advocate that learning about AI should be for everyone in the company. This is not just a data science problem or an engineering problem, and it's not just a leadership problem. It actually needs to be across the entire organization, because the best opportunities to augment a human's job is going to be discovered by someone who's actually doing the job. And so having them understand the fundamentals of AI is a very important thing. We see that the pioneering companies are far ahead of the rest of the world in terms of educating all of their people about AI. And this is a big part of what we do as well, in addition to the strategic process, is going through and teaching companies and teaching individuals through digital products what human machines combinations are like, what AI is from a non-technical perspective. The second is to strategize, and this is what we're here to talk about today. The pioneers in the industry are far ahead. Not only do they feel the urgency to have an AI agenda, but they're doing a very good job of actually creating one. And that having a strategy, understanding AI, and being able to understand how to apply it in your industry and your company is a core part of making sure that you're not left behind. And finally, acceleration. We know that speed of action is incredibly important. This is a difficult thing in some ways because AI takes time, but we can also look back and have a bit of the reflection of history of thinking back to the internet era and seeing how many companies sort of stopped and didn't really move ahead and were left far behind. If you thought that the internet was just about having a .com website and putting up your brochures, you probably aren't in business anymore. The companies that really understood the change that would happen to their business through this new platform are the ones that built the massive new companies. And we see the same thing happening with AI. It's either something that you embrace and tackle and move quickly on, or it's something that will likely be a major competitive barrier forever. Hand it over to talk about the sprint.
Hi. The sprint. So why have a sprint? Why do this? And part of this is when we've worked with companies and clients, one of the biggest problems for people is, how do I start? And even for very sophisticated AI users, they have this problem about bringing people who are non-technical into the process once initial pilots have been done. So we put together the opportunity sprint, and that's what this product is about. And it's because it's about bringing cross-functional teams together to solve this problem. So it's a one-day workshop that's very much customized on the specific requirements of AI. For every stage in it, there's a piece in it that's particular to AI that you wouldn't use in another area. It takes a cross-functional team. It's particularly designed for cross-functional and cross-cutting, so getting people from different layers in the organization as well as different functional groups, and being able to go through a series of convergent and divergent steps, which is sort of a really great way of getting a creative step and then pulling it back again to something that's actionable, and a creative step, actionable. So it has these steps all the way through the day. We like using design thinking techniques for this particular part of what we do with clients. It's a really great way of keeping energy up, of people having fun, of getting high engagement in the problems, but it also helps people really break that sort of status quo thinking. And it's a great peer-to-peer learning opportunity, particularly with AI. Because sometimes AI, we hear a lot of things, a lot of times people say, is AI a solution looking for a problem? And the answer to that is no, but sort of. And because one of the best ways to learn about AI is to actually look at what it's been used for and be inspired by other industries or other examples. And so we like the design thinking techniques as a way of balancing that so that you always come back to a human-centered problem, and it increases your ability to sort of think through the complexity of the problem, particularly when we're talking about humans and machines. We use the Google Design Sprint methodology. We like it for some very particular reasons. After running workshops for close to 20 years, one of the things that I particularly like about the Google Design Sprint method is that it very much focuses on getting decisions at key points and moving on. And it means that you do more of these sprints. You have to do more of them to really triangulate hard issues in an organization. But it means that you get lots of tangible results that people feel like they're actually able to do something with. So with our sprint, we like to pull together a diverse group of people. We've found that one of the most successful things about this workshop is that you can have someone in the room who has no idea what AI is, and you can have an AI prof and everything in between, and people absolutely love it. All of them love it, because there's this ability to really share knowledge and to use the tools that and the videos that we have and the materials that we have in this opportunity sprint to actually really accelerates people's practical understanding of what AI can do. And they get just enough technical knowledge of how it actually works to start thinking really creatively and ask fundamentally different questions than they would at any other time. I've touched a little bit on some of the problems that we've really organized to solve in an opportunity sprint. Some of it is being very human about what AI is, putting everything in very human terms, not in really technical terms. So we get people to engage with a particular style of AI, which we teach you about, and start thinking about that in terms of superhero, an AI superhero, and it really brings out what this AI is all about and makes it really fun, and people feel like they can have fun by thinking about creating a superhero. We don't talk about off the bat about technical terms like trade-offs between precision and recall. We talk about good and bad, and we put things in very personal terms where we get people to think about personal experiences they have and start mapping those, and then using that later, teaching you later in the process how to map those to your products or your company's choices. And we get very specific about what these outcomes need to look like to turn things into projects. So there's many templates, there's many documents that are set up for reporting back on the sprint, for starting off a new project, they help you templatize those steps. And we also encourage and explore ways to use different metrics. So a lot of the design thinking that we've done over the years, one of the weaknesses and frustrations we have with design thinking is you can run 20 workshops and from one company, and you can walk away and have no idea how to assimilate that for a leader across teams. But we give guidance and coaching on how to pull out important metrics so that if you do 10 of these workshops across different functional areas in the company, you can actually report on different ways that different groups see the same issue, which is really handy. We provide all of the material for the actual training and coaching, so you can run a video, or you can do it yourself with the speaker notes, and so that enables people to really sort of get up to speed quickly. And I've already talked about some of these things, but mostly just to land it again. So all the instructional videos are included so that you can run one of these yourselves. There's step-by-step instructions. We provide all the speaker notes and the videos, all of the posters, and all of the rationale, so you know what you're kind of aiming at. So if you get into if you need to sort of customize a slightly different way of doing it, that experienced facilitators can say, well, I know what I'm trying to aim at, and here's another technique that I'd like to use to get there. So it's really flexible from that perspective. Tips, everyone likes tips for how to get unstuck in certain places and how to deal with difficult people. And we also, everything is designed that you can do this remotely. So how to chunk it up into a remote workshop over a longer period of time, but pull in people from many different parts of the world. Data capture and reporting, like being able to draw conclusions over many of these, and all the templates and posters. So that's a quick wrap up from me.
All right, excellent. So that gives us an overview of AI, and it gives us an overview of this workshop. Let's just sort of dive into some of the questions, both the questions that we received in advance and then any questions that anybody here today might want to ask. So I think we go ahead and let's go ahead and stop the presentation.
Yeah.
All right, so I have some questions coming in. The first one is, you know, AI is moving so fast. What are some of the top sources, so like newsletters, podcasts, websites, that people can use to help grow their skills and stay up to date?
It's a good question. There's everything from plenty of news sources. We tend to be biased towards, we like the Quartz writers. We used to work with them, so we know them quite well. We think they're quite good. Their AI reporter just recently moved to Medium, so that to a new publication. Wired does a great job. MIT Tech Review does a fantastic job. So there's all that sort of general sort of news places. Each of them have some form of newsletter. So there's a great one from MIT Tech Review. Karen Howe puts it out, which is a great one. There's also a great weekly newsletter from called Exponential View. A guy named Azim, who lives in London, has built quite a large following. He covers more than just AI, but that's a good one. And a long-standing one called, an entrepreneur named Rob May, called Inside AI. That's part of the Inside newsletter portion. We publish quite a lot, so you can sign up and get all of our content as part of a newsletter. So we put out quite a lot of content there. I think beyond that, when you're thinking about that learning journey, there's a surface level of understanding of what's the great news and what's going on, and people tell you what's happening with the new algorithm or what's happening with the Facebook and but there's sort of the next level of journey and learning is getting down and actually understanding what's happening under the hood. And there's sort of two paths for that. There's one which is, if you want to be a data scientist, then you need to go actually learn data science. And it's not just the quick path of understanding Python on a Udacity course. it's actually to having a true degree, because data science is a science. And we have the view that the true data scientists have at least a master's, if not a PhD. And that's a big journey and a big lift to become an expert there. There's definitely a great way of learning about AI by becoming a software engineer, where you're actually applying that science, but that's again another trade. We stepped in to try and fill that need with for non-technical people to learn about it through our courses. And that's one of the few places, because generally people are focused on helping people learn the technical skills, but learning how to be business leaders takes a different kind of thing. In terms of one of the, I think they said books, we actually have a blog post that lists out a whole bunch of interesting books. We'll also very shortly creating a new section on our website that's a bookshelf. So stay tuned. We will have a listing of our favorite books. This is all Helen. She does the mess of the books, why, and only the ones we recommend. So it'll be a bookshelf of the great books about AI and a bit of a review from Helen, and so it's a great way to go through and learn it. But just hang tight; it'll launch shortly.
Okay, and I think I'm going to put your website address in the chat. If I got it wrong, fix it.
That's correct. And all
okay.
that the bookshelf and stuff will just be free and available to people. So
cool. So there are some other questions here, and I think one that's a nice segue from this conversation about how do you stay up to date. So one of the things you talked about both in the presentation and just now is that this is a huge topic, and to become truly expert in it, you want a degree, right? You get the data scientists, and you look at the big data and whatnot, and a lot of that implies big money. So the question is, how much data does one need to make AI a worthwhile investment? And is this something that small companies with smaller data sets, or maybe even companies that aren't really thinking in terms of data sets yet, they might be just thinking in terms of how do I take advantage of AI in my service design or something like that? Is there something here for the smaller organizations, or is this really the world of big companies?
Oh, this is definitely something that's becoming more and more available to smaller companies. And the reason is a couple of different reasons. One is there's plenty of small AI startups that are available to as vendors, although assessing the vendor landscape is definitely difficult in AI. But probably the biggest reason is because the whole direction for all of these companies is to build AI that requires less data. So that's kind of one of the key research directions. So what you tend to find is this bit of a sweet spot happening between people using publicly available data sets, training models, and then you only need to do a little bit of training on your data specifically to actually build a model that works for you. So think about it as pre-training. So many of the products come with a degree of pre-training. And some of the costs for these things are actually pretty modest. I mean, Amazon Recognition, which is their computer vision app, it's got some bad press recently because of using facial recognition for surveillance and policing. But the technology is what Amazon uses in Amazon Go and in its warehouses, so a big one, but you can wire it up for kind of less than $1,000 a month on your own data without it necessarily needing a lot of data. So all of these things, there's always a problem giving a kind of general answer, but it's definitely something that more and more smaller companies are able to use. Another one is chat, building really useful and helpful chat applications to support customers. Those have been done by smaller and smaller customers because there's places, or companies, because there's actually places to go to develop and build these. And there's a huge groundswell of DIY kind of AI where we see it.
So many acronyms.
Yeah, we see it time and time again. We had a really interesting client who, someone in their free time, literally wired up an Alexa skill to create a hands-free app for teachers in preschools. And the teachers in the preschool need to fill in a form at a certain amount of time after a child is injured, like bitten by another kid, or stubbs their toe.
Yeah.
But the form filling is getting in the way of caring for the child. So there's like this really big pain point. I mean, you have a person there to care for a child, not to fill in a form. And we see more and more of these sort of use cases where someone's able to quickly get on and build an Alexa skill to do one very narrow thing. So you do see everything from this sort of nano AI right through to taking something from Amazon and customizing it for whatever size company.
One other example, one of the screenshots that we showed, the image recognition that had put boxes around people. That's from a company called Clarify, and they worked very hard to use small amounts of data so that you can hand it, a dozen or two pictures of your product or your logo, and it can find and identify that across massive amounts of data. So they've worked very hard at actually bringing the amount of data that's required to be quite small. Now, there's other scenarios for AI where mass data is the only way it will work. It's the only way it will be accurate enough. But that's where you get into this question of navigating through the strategy to say, what kind of an experience do you want to have with the AI? What kind of interaction do you need? How accurate do you need it? What kind of responses do you allow for when it's accurate or not accurate? That sort of weaving through the design process is what we find so fascinating. I also would say we actually think the opportunity for small business is really important and big, and that's actually a big focus for us, is understanding how to bring packaged solutions to companies so that are ready and easy to use, rather than relying purely on the opportunities that where you need a full data science team.
Well, that brings me to both a question that I had and that I'm seeing pop up here in the questions as well. So I had an opportunity to go through an early version of the course, which will be live for those of you who are wondering on September 12th. And I saw how you could walk through and learn about some of these different scenarios and map your own assets and whatnot. But when we talk about small companies, one of the assets that is always challenging is budget and time to get everybody in the room for a day. Right. So the workshop is designed as a full, intensive one-day design sprint. Can you talk a little bit about how people might adapt it for other situations, say either when they can't devote that much time in person or if they're dealing in a remote setting?
Sure. So what we've done is chunking it up into 3 particular slots that kind of work, these buckets that can work at like for 2 hours at a time. And those fall naturally in terms of the flow of the day. So that's one way, is to not try and have everyone sitting on a conference call for 8 hours, because that generally is pretty tough going. The other is being really specific about where people can, like when you can make it a better way of even doing it, because you've got more time to go and educate people. You've got more time to go and be hands-on and learn something. The opportunity sprint in a day with an intensive group is really very intensive. You have to be people are exhausted at the end of it, because you've got to be really focused on some very key learning points in it. Whereas in if you split it up into 3 or 4 days, 3 or 4 sessions over a month, which is how we kind of recommend it, that gives a lot more time for people to go away and do their own particular research on their own particular use case. So I think there's an advantage as well with that. And then we also recommend the way to use a visual workspace. We've got our posters are available, but we're partnering with Mural to make that a slicker experience. And all the things you see here, the chat, being able to appreciate that people kind of are multitasking at particular moments and how to use that. and then how to document, share things as you're producing these templates so that everyone gets an opportunity. So all of those are included in the instructions.
I had an opportunity to talk with the guys at Mural about what this might look like in their software. And I think that option for a remote team, you know, using things like Zoom and Mural and Slack, and then breaking it up and moving some of the research or the brainstorming things into pre-work really makes sense. And I super appreciate that you put instructions on how to do that at the end. So, in terms of this as a workshop, is this one of those things that's like a one and done, or what do you actually see in practice works best for people when they start to embark on their AI journey?
Well, part of it depends a little bit on where, like, a particular individual's role in a company and how big the company is. Because this is something that you could use with a relatively small group of people, like 20 people, and do it multiple times to get a sense of right across the business, how does everyone see the AI opportunities, and how disparate and different, and where are these strategies sort of converge into the highest value. So that could be this bottom-up build. Or you could start at very much the top with the executive team and you know the sort of core leadership of the organization to actually just sort of set this overall theme. But the way that AI works best and will work best is when there are people, like, there's both the bottom up and the top down. So I think in many respects, one of the most useful places for this workshop is in the product organization, where you're sitting down thinking at your product, you know, the product management group, saying, what new revenue can we go and get? What new products can we make? What new markets can we open up? Because we're going to look at this technology and what it can do for us. So that's definitely one really major sort of hotspot for how to think about running these workshops.
I think the two other hotspots are customer experience teams. So the sales and marketing group that are thinking about how to use AI to better service customers, and then also the employee experience. So the internal focusing HR teams, whatever talent and culture, or whatever the name of it is in your organization, but looking about how to use AI from everything from attracting employees all the way through the employee life cycle of being an employee, and how do you use it in those kinds of areas where you think about there's a huge opportunity for making connections between humans and machines and having teams come together. But I echo what Helen said, is that it's best done when it's being done across an organization in many different groups, because part of the day there's a very short mini AI masterclass at the beginning of the sprint, which makes sure that everybody is on the same page of how to think about AI and how to think about how it learns and what language to use. And we whoever's facilitating works through a whole series of inspirations of the greatest opportunities for using AI. So we have a whole series where you're looking at different options of how things have, how companies have been successful using AI. And that portion of it works as a really good quick start education in AI for everybody across the organization. So suddenly everybody feels like they've got a language to use. They can actually talk about AI. They can have a conversation with a technical person in a way that puts them somewhat on the same, that same footing. And that starts the whole journey for an entire company. And as Helen described, at the end of each opportunity sprint, we focus on helping people get through and measure. You're not only creating a roadmap of what to go do, but you're documenting what came out of that day and finding as many metrics as are possible in this kind of a day that can be bubbled up as an organization to try and see where do all of our people think there's an opportunity. So if you think about it from a very high level strategic point of view, we think this is great for an executive offsite, but it is also great for an executive team to see the results. We did this 20 times, and this is the data that's aggregating off of this.
Yeah, that's especially powerful in a manufacturing environment, because you end up with very, very different results on the floor of and on the front line than you do with people that are more on the customer end. And knitting those things together, that there's quite unexpected places where AI opportunities pop up, because and a lot of them get driven by not just the value in the manufacturing process, but the fact that AI can actually be really it's not very intimate. It doesn't have to have a mood. It has a different failure mode, so people actually feel like it's lower risk to even implement. So there's all of these other facets that come into play, and we've seen examples of computer vision being used in manufacturing for grading timber in a way that it's what wasn't great for the person who was standing there looking at grading timber for a while, but now they're retrained and doing something else. So these things it is complex, and you do need to look across the whole system of the business.
I can see how you would get dramatically different results from the different levels of an organization where you've got that kind of split. And I've got to imagine that's true in other industries where you have that same kind of really distinction between, say, administration and frontline, like education or healthcare, or perhaps military, right? Where the people who are on the ground doing the work are having a very different experience than the generals or the paper and the legal folks. But in those environments, unlike manufacturing, there's a mood, for sure. And
Sure.
There are absolutely ethical concerns involved. So is that something that teams address, and how do you approach a topic like AI through the workshop that educates but also handles some of these ethical, moral kinds of concerns?
Well, ethics and ethical, responsible AI is a huge topic for us, and we basically almost start with that in the opportunity sprint. It's because it's so important to actually start with defining, getting people sensitized right up front to these ethical issues, because they matter so much. Now, in military is fascinating because this is a really high priority for the military. We're talking to different parts of the military all the time, and their biggest challenge is how do they get people on the front lines thinking in such high-tech terms. And their attitude is, we've got to actually have a real hands-on question to answer, a problem to solve. So that's kind of how we talk to them about this. And healthcare is always the most difficult area because it's the highest regulated, but it's also got the highest stakes. And you probably, I don't know how many of you have heard of the term, the fourth industrial revolution, which is what we're talking about now, the impact of AI on work and on industry. But the medical industry, the health industry talks about themselves as still being in the third industrial revolution. They're still struggling to make many technology transitions. And so there's a lot of really interesting opportunities in healthcare, but it absolutely involves what's happening between the practitioner and the patient. And that's really where people are trying to focus in on healthcare. So if there's three phases of this health transition: digitize, democratize, decentralize. What they're really trying to do now is how can AI really decentralize some of the decision making? How can AI help practitioners get time back with patients, not be sitting in an electronic health record that was there for billing purposes, not for healthcare purposes.
Right.
So health is really an entire field of AI on its own, and is probably the most interesting of all areas in AI.
Well, you bring up an interesting point of the comparison between sort of the executive level and the front line. If you go all the way to the top to the bottom. And one of the reasons that's so important to understand is that the executives, the minority of executives think that AI is going to have an impact on their individual job, whereas the majority of frontline people think it's going to have an impact.
Yeah.
So you have two very different views about what the risk is of AI to their individual roles. And part of that is due to understanding. Part of that is an overblown sense of confidence, perhaps, on the executives, and perhaps too much fear on the part of frontline.
On a misunderstanding of
misunderstanding
what humans are good at and what machines are good at, and we spend a lot of time teaching people about that.
Yes. So you look at, there's one good example is a customer service opportunity. A lot of the conversations around chatbots and other things that would seem to take away jobs or take away portions of jobs. But there's also a really fascinating company that's built an assistant for customer service reps, especially those in very complex situations. So they like to talk a lot about insurance reps. We're dealing with a disability claim. And this AI will listen to the customer service representative that's dealing with the patient, and it will nudge them to, you seem a bit sleepy, so, or you're cutting somebody off a little bit much, or, whatever else it is that it's learned by listening to lots and lots of customer service reps about what makes a successful call. And what's fascinating is the best customer service reps love this tool because it helps them be better, but it gives them a big cheer every time they're good. So if you're a good customer service rep, how awesome to have an AI sitting there saying, you're doing great, and so it's turned out to be quite effective, and people really like it. It makes everybody's, the customer and the rep and the whole company is having a better experience. And so it's that kind of sort of counterintuitive use of AI, that you have an AI that can actually help a human be a better human.
But that also has to be driven from the front lines, which is
yes.
sort of going back to the military one, because otherwise it breeds cynicism. We were talking to someone, Marines, yesterday, and I wrote it down. Reps of utility is a term that the Marines use, and that if something's coming from the top and it doesn't have reps of utility at the bottom, it's going to die. So they think about, how do we look at something in the field, and how often, it's just simple, how often is it used by the people in the field? Because if it keeps getting used, then it's working. It's just that simple. But they specifically hone in on that as a number to watch, essentially. Mm-hmm. And so that's kind of what we do with some of these AI tools in the field.
So that's I think that's a good point. Raises another question then, because it's quite clear that from all of the things you talked about and all of the discussion, that this is the sort of workshop that you'd want to run more than once, like we talked about. And I know you guys go around and you talk with the Marines and all the people, and you do the workshop as a facilitated service. But here you've put it out as something that other people can run on their own. So is the intent when people take the course that they can, learn it and offer it as a service to their clients, or, that they can get a license and then they can run it like 100 times within their companies? Is that kind of what are you scaling yourself in a way that's like physically impossible to do as two facilitators?
Yeah, I mean, the idea is definitely to scale the use of the sprint as much as possible. So from a license perspective, once you have it, you get to use it. So there isn't a sort of an add-on model in terms of how many times you use it. We provide in the course, there's a couple of sections that are more educational. And we provide slides with speaker narrative, not just notes, but it's written out as a full narrative that you can deliver. We also provide a video recording of us giving the slides. So there's a combination there of how much do you want to, you can press play and have a 5 or 10 minute video, or you can run the video yourself basically by running the slides. So we try to make sure that even if people aren't very familiar with AI, if they're not an expert at it, this is not a sprint that requires them to become one. This is one that you should be able to, the real skill is having the skill of facilitation, of running the meeting, of being a leader in that room. The goal is this is not something that you need to be an AI expert to deliver. And I think that's a really important part of all of this, where this is a day of shared learning and shared co-creation between the facilitator and all the participants. A good interest in AI and digging in a lot ahead of time would be really helpful. We assume people would want to, but you're not expected to be an expert at it to run the meeting.
That's cool. That's super useful. I know selfishly I am, as a meeting school author, so this is a course in meeting school that's coming up soon, and anyone who provides a course in meeting school gets free access to all of the other courses, and I am looking forward to taking advantage of that. I know the service assistant you were talking about, that's Cochito? Is that who that is? That company that helps the customer service people know that they're on board? I know in the meeting world, they're working on similar products to help people go, hey, you're losing some energy. Hey, you forgot to call on Fred. So, some facilitator aids from an AI perspective are part of the future. It'd be kind of very exciting. All right, so we've got about 5 minutes left, and we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. If there are any final questions that you felt like you asked before and they didn't get answered, or that you need to know now is the time, go ahead and add them into the question box. And with that, I think we'll go ahead and take a look at next steps. So I'll pull up my presentation, which is here. All right, so we've already done the introduction. So next steps, we've talked about the workshop, and by now it's really clear that this is going to be available as a course. When? Well, today. So registration for the course is open today. And while we're still working on getting it all meeting school polished up, there's a $100 early bird discount that makes the course price for 1 week to be $297. Which is, I don't know about you guys and what you charge for a full day workshop, but I sure don't charge $297 if I show up in somebody's company for a day. So it's pretty much the screamingest deal ever for small companies. That price will go up to $397 when the course opens, which is September 12th. So if that's interesting to you, if this is something that you think you might use, or either in your company with your team or with a client, this is your week. So you'll get to that. The course is on school.lucidmeetings.com, and I'll show you that link in a moment. So that's what's happening this week. Now, going forward, in the Lucid Meetings universe, we have talked for quite a while that anybody who is a Lucid Meetings customer will have the opportunity to participate in our live community of practice events. And we've talked about that for a while, but we haven't done that. So I'm excited to announce that our first customer-only gathering will be September 17th. So watch your email. We'll have an announcement about that coming out this Tuesday. I'll talk about what that entails, how to get involved. These are going to be very hands-on community of practice opportunities where we focus on a theme, and then we actually take an opportunity to talk with each other and practice some techniques that help us run excellent, effective meetings. That's coming September 17th. And then on September 22nd, our next webinar will be an introduction to a new course on how to lead engaging meetings with master facilitator Barbara McKay. She is a top certified facilitator, so theory of participation, with decades of experience working from North Star facilitators, and she walks us through all kinds of fabulous engaging techniques. And she's an entirely different kind of facilitator than many of the other facilitators that we've worked with. So if you like color, if you like energy, if you like enthusiasm, that will be something you'll want to check out. And that's on September 22nd will be the webinar introducing her work. And with that, I encourage you to go check out how to run an artificial intelligence strategy workshop on school.lucidmeetings.com. Now, double check to make sure we don't have any final questions. And I don't believe we do. So with that, I want to thank you all for participating, and we will send you out the recording soon. Thank you, Helen. Thank you, Dave. Really learned a lot. Thought that was really useful.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.